The courtroom was silent, too silent. A heavy, suffocating stillness as the massive wooden doors creaked open. Every eye turned, every breath held, as a small figure stepped inside. Her tiny hand gripped a silver chain, and at the end of that chain, Zephyr, a towering German shepherd, its black and gray coat gleaming under the dim lights. By her side stood Isabella Vaughan, 6 years old, eyes deep green like the ocean before a storm. The only witness to this case. A case that could finally bring down the monster in human skin sitting across the room. Darius Kane leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a smirk playing at the corner of his lips. He had seen countless trials, felt no fear, every charge it dismissed. Every witness, silence. No one had ever come close. Something felt different. Judge Victor Langston brought the gavel down with a sharp crack, eyes cold, piercing, like they could see through every shadow in the room. This court is now in session. Isabella climbed onto the witness stand. She didn't look at anyone, didn't speak, just tightened her grip on the silver chain. Zephyr sat at her feet, still, too still, like a coiled spring. Waiting, it happened. The moment her gaze met Darius Kane's, something shifted, barely noticeable. A flicker of movement, a signal, so subtle that only two in the room caught it. Zephyr and Judge Langston. Zephyr's ear snapped up, his muscles tensed. A loud guttural growl rumbled from deep within his chest. No one ignored it. No one. Darius Kane went still. The smugness in his eyes faltered, just for a second. But it was enough. Whisper spread like wildfire. A slow, rising wave of unease. Judge Langston's gavel struck the desk once more. But this time, a touch more urgent. But this court will recess for 15 minutes. Out in the hallway, Isabella sat on the cold floor, her arms wrapped tightly around Zephyr. She didn't cry, but her small body shook, as if a storm was raging inside her. One that couldn't break into sound. Across from her, Prosecutor Celeste Moore exchanged a knowing glance with Judge Langston. No words were needed. They both understood. In that brief, fleeting moment, a buried truth had begun to surface. And perhaps, Zephyr was the key to unlocking the final door of this case. The summer that changed everything that summer. The Vaughans' backyard was bursting with color. Wildflowers swayed in the golden sun. A little girl twirled in a pale yellow dress, her soft brown curl bouncing with every spin. Laughter filled the air, bright like wind chimes dancing in the summer breeze. From the kitchen window, Alina Vaughn watched her daughter. A gentle smile touched her lips. To Isabella, the world was still painted in warm, vibrant colors, but in the blink of an eye, doors would be swallowed by an eerie shade of gray. A shadow appeared at the backyard gate. "Hello there, little one." The voice was smooth, too smooth. Isabella stopped mid-spin. A tall man stood by the gate. Dark hair, neatly combed. A well-fitted suit, simple but precise. He crouched to her eye level, holding up a small box, its lid slightly open. Inside, the faint glimpse of tiny, soft fur. "I have some puppies that need a little owner to take care of them. Would you like to see?" A flicker of curiosity passed through Isabella's bright green eyes. Her tiny fingers fidgeted with the hem of her dress, considering, but before she could react, a firm voice cut through the air. "Hey, what are you doing here?" Martha Reynolds, the Vaughan next-door neighbor. She stood at the fence, sharp gaze locked on the man. Her small terrier barked furiously, hackles raised. Her eyes flickered down to his hand. He had just reached for Isabella's wrist. For half a second, the man hesitated. Then he tightened his grip. Just slightly. The little girl froze. Didn't struggle. She just stood there, like a forgotten doll. But that was all Martha needed to see. "Let her go." She charged, marred the gate. The man's grip immediately loosened. He spun around and ran, straight into the narrow alley behind the yard. A black van sat waiting, its engine already rumbling. In a blink he was gone, leaving nothing behind, except the backyard gate, still swaying in the breeze. Alina rushed out of the house. She fell to her knees, wrapping Isabella in her arms. Her whole body trembled. Her legs barely held her up. But Isabella didn't cry, didn't say a word. She only clutched onto the fabric of her mother's dress, fingers gripping so tight her knuckles turned white. From that day on, Isabella's world was drowned in silence. No more bedtime stories, no more laughter echoing through the garden, only a deafening stillness, as if every sound in the world had been drained away. Alina tried everything. Therapists, reading her daughter's favorite books. Nothing changed. Every night, Isabella curled up with her worn-out stuffed rabbit, staring at the ceiling, eyes empty. She never spoke about what happened that day, and no one knew if she ever would. But one thing was certain. The nightmare wasn't over, because years later, when Isabella saw him again in that courtroom, she knew. Most a year had passed. But Isabella Vaughan's world was still silent. She hadn't spoken a single word since that date. Every sound had abandoned her, leaving behind a void cold and unreachable. Doctors called it selective mutism, a defense mechanism, the brain's way of shutting down under trauma. But no matter the reason, Isabella just sat there, distant, like she had drifted too far away to ever find her way back. Alina Vaughan had tried everything. Therapists, gentle bedtime talks, fairy tales Isabella used to love. No till one day, Isabella's therapist, Dr. Lawrence Graves, suggested something new. A therapy dogs. Alina frowned. Dr. Greaves smiled. Animals can reach place with a soul that people cannot. Maybe this is what Isabella needs. And so, on a crisp autumn afternoon, Isabella was taken to a special therapy center. She met Zephyr, a German shepherd, strong with a gray-black coat and deep brown eyes that seemed to see everything. Zephyr entered the room, slow, but not imposing. He didn't rush toward Isabella, didn't jump like an excitable puppy. He just simply speed away, waiting, patient. Isabella didn't move, didn't react, just stared at Zephyr, her tiny hands gripping the fabric of her dress, a habit she couldn't shake. A minute passed, then another. Zephyr stepped closer. One step, then another. The room was so silent, you could hear Isabella's soft, shaky breath. She didn't back away, didn't turn her head. And then, like a tiny miracle, her hand lifted, fingers trembling, reaching, until they brushed against warm fur. Soft, steady. Alina covered her mouth. Tears spilled over silently. For the first time in months, Isabella reached for something, and didn't pull away in fear. Dr. Greaves gave a slow, knowing nod. We've just taken the first step. From that day forward, Isabella and Zephyr became inseparable. Every afternoon, she sat beside him, tiny fingers threading through his thick fur, her eyes no longer empty. She still didn't speak, but something was changing. The nightmares weren't as relentless. The panic attacks grew fewer, and when the fear came in the dead of night, Zephyr was always there, silent, moving, never asking for anything, just there. Until one day, the real miracle happened. Isabella sat on the floor, fingers tracing thoughtless circles against the wood. Zephyr curled up beside her, eyes half lit in a lazy doze. Then she stopped. A small crease formed between her brows. Her fingertips brushed against an old scar on Zephyr's side, a faint, jagged mark from his days as a working dog. Zephyr's ears twitched. He cracked one eye open. Isabella's lips parted. Her voice was so soft, so fragile, that the wind itself could have carried it away. Does it hurt? From across the room, Alina almost collapsed. Zephyr didn't answer. Of course he couldn't. But he lifted his head and pressed a warm, wet lick against her small fingers. A silent reply. Isabella blinked, and then something appeared on her lips, so faint, so delicate, but undeniable. A smile. Eleanor's entire world shifted, because Isabella had found her voice, and thanks to Zephyr, she was finally stepping out of the dark. The entire courtroom held its breath, as Isabella Vaughan took her seat once more. Small, fragile, just 7 years old. But her eyes held a depth far beyond her years. She knew monsters. Not the kind hiding under beds, but the kind that walked among people. Zephyr sat at her feet, still as stone, muscles taut like a bowstring ready to snap. No one spoke. No one dared break the silence. And then, Isabella looked up. She met Darius Canna's gaze. The man at the defendant's table pressed his lips together. But his eyes stayed carefully, artificially calm. He had played this game too many times. For too many years. A child wouldn't shake him, but he was wrong. Slowly, deliberately, Isabella raised her small hand. Her fingers twitched. Just barely. A motion so subtle that anyone familiar with the signal would miss it entirely. But Zephyr saw it, and so did Judge Langston. But two beings noticed instantly. Zephyr and Judge Victor Langston. The reaction was immediate. Once a calm, controlled therapy dog, transformed. His ears snapped upright. Muscles coiled tight. His deep brown eyes, sharp as a blade, locked onto Darius Kane, and then, from deep within his chest, a loud rumbling growl. Threatening. No one moved. No one breathed. Darius Kane remained still. But for the first time, something shifted in his face. Something barely noticeable. But Judge Langston saw it. The fingers Kane had rested on the table. Once carefully relaxed, now clenched. Knuckles turning white. Judge Langston's brow furrowed. He had presided over hundreds of trials, but never a courtroom like this one. A prosecution. His voice was calm, but unyielding. I need an explanation. Celeste Moore rose to her feet. She hadn't expected this, but every instinct told her this moment could change everything. Your Honor, she said, glancing at Isabella before turning back to Langston. He would believe that the defendant, Darius Kane, may have encountered the witness before, under circumstances yet to be determined. Defense attorney Vincent Halshaw shut up instantly. The objection. This is pure speculation. A dog's reaction cannot be considered valid evidence in this trial. Judge Langston leaned forward. His elbows rested on the bench. Fingers interlocked, his gaze sharp as steel. There is one thing I know for certain. His voice was steady. Unshaken. The dogs don't lie. At the prosecution's table, FBI agent Nathan Calloway leaned slightly. He exchanged a look with Celeste Moore. A silent message passed between them. Moments later, a new order was issued. An investigative team was dispatched immediately. Every location Darius Kane had set foot in over the last 3 years would be re-examined. Because if Zephyr recognized him, then that meant one thing. Isabella wasn't the only child who had come face to face with this monster. And his secret was about to be exposed. 30 miles north of the city, hidden deep within the dense canopy of Black Hollow Forest, stood an old, abandoned cabin. Moss-covered, or at least, that is how it appeared. Dust-cloaked wing roof tiles. Wooden walls split and cracked by time. But FBI Special Agent Nathan Calloway's team knew better. Because Zephyr had led them here. After Zephyr's reaction in the courtroom, the FBI had reopened every case linked to Darius Kane. And then, they found it. A plot of land on the city's outskirts, a cabin registered under a false identity. But the financial trail, straight back to Cannier's accounts. We could be chasing ghosts, one officer muttered. Calloway shook his head. No, I don't think we are. Zephyr trotted ahead, leading the way, every step deliberate, every movement precise, as if he already knew where they were going. And then, Zephyr froze, ears perked, body rigid, nose twitching against the crisp forest air. A low growl rumbled from his chest. Calloway didn't hesitate. Take positions. The team moved in. Cautiously, stealthily, the front door unlocked, which meant one of two things. Either this place had been truly abandoned, or someone was inside. One officer pushed the door open. Gun raised. Inside, the air was frigid and stale. Furniture tossed over, dust caking the wooden floor. But there were signs, undeniable proof, that this place hadn't been left to rot. A flashlight discarded in the corner, fresh footprints stamped in the dust. And they found it. A small door at the back of the room. A staircase, leading down. Calloway exchanged a glance with his team, took a deep breath and gave order. "We are going in." They descended step by step, flashlights slicing through the damp stone walls. The air grew heavier, thicker, suffocating with secrets, too terrible to remain buried forever. Then the flashlight beam cut through the darkness. A chain, a tattered mattress, and a little girl, huddled in the shadows. She was no older than 8, clothes filthy, hair tangled. Her wide, terrified eyes locked onto the light. As the beam fell across her face, she shrank back. Her frail body trembled. "Oh my God!" A whisper from one of the officers. Calloway knelt down, slowly extending his hand. "What is your name, sweetheart?" She didn't answer, but her cracked lips quivered, as if trying to force out words. Words too broken to be spoken. Then, Zephyr stepped forward. He didn't come too close, just lowered his head, his deep brown eyes. Understanding, for a long moment, the room was silent. Time itself seemed to pause. And then, the girl moved. She threw herself forward, wrapped her tiny arms around Zephyr's neck, and sobbed. Calloway exhaled sharply. "We found her." As the team carried the girl out, a name finally slipped past her trembling lips. Lena. She had been missing for a year. And now, everything was clear. Darius Kane wasn't just a failed kidnapper. He was a monster. A predator who had lurked in the shadows for years. But this time, he wasn't getting away. The courtroom was packed. Tension thick in the air, every eye locked on the defendant's table, where Darius Kane sat, motionless. His arrogance, his once smug confidence, now fractured. A man who once believed that he could slip through the cracks of the law, now faced with an undeniable truth. Celeste Moore, lead prosecutor, stepped forward. She placed the thick case file on the table. Then she lifted her gaze and met the eyes of the jury. "Your Honor, the final piece of evidence we today will leave no room for doubt. Darius Kane is the mastermind behind a series of child abductions." Celeste Moore's voice rang through the courtroom, clear and unwavering. She gestured, and a large screen lit up. The first images appeared, a series of photographs of the abandoned cabin, the place where Lena Carter had been found after a year in captivity. Next, the forensic evidence, fingerprints, fabric fibers from Kanna's coat discovered in the basement. But the final blow was the recording, a short audio clip extracted from a phone Khan had made. His own voice, cold, calculated, giving orders to an unidentified accomplice. "Make sure there's nothing left that can tie me to those missing kids." The courtroom erupted. Whispers turned into low murmurs. The jury exchanged tense glances. Some shook their heads in disgust. But the strongest reaction came from Darius Kane himself. He flinched. His fingers tightened around the arms of his chair. Sweat glistened on his forehead. And for the first time since the trail began, there was fear in his eyes. He knew he had lost. Vincent Hale, the defense attorney, shot to his feet. But before he'd object, Kane lifted a hand, swallowed hard, his voice rasping. "Vicky, I want to change my plea." Silence. A heavy, deafening silence. Judge Victor Langston studied Kane, his gaze sharp as a blade. Mr. Kane, are you saying you wish to confess?" 1 second. Then, Kane nodded. His entire body seemed to collapse under the weight of his own defeat. "Yes." At a verdict, a new beginning, a wave of noise erupted in the courtroom. Some people exhaled sharply, faces twisted with anger, eyes burning with fury. But in the front row, Eleanor Vaughn tightened her grip on her daughter's hand. Isabella often didn't look at Kane. She simply lowered her gaze, her small fingers clutching onto the thick fur of Zephyr. Zephyr, however, never took his eyes off Kane. His deep brown gaze held something indescribable. A warning, a recognition. Darius Kane may have escaped justice in the past, but not this time. In the backyard, sunlight cascaded gently over Isabella's small shoulders. Zephyr sat beside her, his large head resting against her legs. Helena Vound stood a few steps away, quietly watching. A soft breeze swept through the garden, rustling the wild flowers, and then Isabella lowered herself slightly, her delicate fingers threading through Zephyr's fur. She smiled. The thank you, Zephyr, the first words she had spoken freely. Since that fateful day, Helena covered her mouth, tears spilling over. Zephyr lifted his head, watching Isabella, then gently wagged his tail, before nudging his head into her embrace. Justice had been served, but more importantly, Isabella had found her voice again.